Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, here at the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast. I'm very happy to be here with you all. I always enjoy taking the time to speak with you, and I'm thankful that you guys are coming back in our fourth year to be with us as we continue our efforts to not only talk about the issues of the day, but to bring in many of the people who are helping to shape the way our politics are being discussed and the types of laws and issues that are going through our legislative process. And part of that is talking about what's been happening here in New York State. The Libertarian Party, not only in New York State, across the entire nation, they have gotten a lot of attention in the 2016 election. Many people may remember Gary Johnson came out, he ran, did a great job of getting attention towards the party. We saw that momentum catapult. And in the 2018 midterms, we saw throughout New York State the emergence of Larry Sharpe, who was the candidate to run for governor versus Andrew Cuomo. While he did lose that race, he wound up doing a fantastic job of getting the Libertarian Party, after 50 years of effort, they became a recognized party in New York State and now are on equal footing with the Republicans, the Democrats, the Conservatives, the Working Families Party, and now there is the Libertarian Party. And you may hear more about that in my interview I did last week with Larry Sharpe, directly talking about some of this. But I wanted to further move that forward, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about this. And that's why we have our very special guest and someone I've enjoyed speaking with in the past. You may recall his name is Alex Merced, and he is on with us right now. Alex, how are you?
Hey, Mike. It's so great to be back on the show again. So much has happened since we last talked. As you mentioned, now the Libertarian Party is a state recognized party in New York. Since the last time we talked, I've become the national vice chair for the party. And basically, the party is growing and it's hitting a lot of really great milestones.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, for people who are not aware, we had we did a two-part interview back on August 9th of 2016. People can look that up on the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast. That's at vosspolitical.podbean.com. And so that's one of the sources where we had it. And yeah, I saw the Wikipedia page. I saw your website as well. First of all, great job. You're on Wikipedia. Gotta love that.
Thank you. Yeah. That was cool. That was a nice surprise. I was like, whoa, cool.
Did you know that someone was putting you up on there?
No, what happened one day that I was actually hanging out. Every once in a while I go home and I visit my mom. And my mom got one of those Google Alexa devices.
Right.
So we just joked around and asked the device, who is Alex Merced? And then it actually started reading the Wikipedia page and we're like, huh? And it actually was describing me. So then I went and looked it up and saw that the Wikipedia page was up and I was like, oh, cool.
You gotta love that. I mean, not everyone gets a Wikipedia page, and it's a nice little perk to say, hey, I'm on Wikipedia. You gotta love that.
Yes. Basically, I think it happened shortly after last year's national convention where I became the vice chair. That kind of triggered, or I guess, allowed Wikipedia to have a page about myself.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, and let's talk a little bit about who Alex Merced is. In 2013, you were on the Libertarian ticket. You ran in New York City against, believe it or not, Letitia James. Now, a lot of people may be familiar with that name. She's now taken over in New York based on the 2018. Now, it's like the first time that anyone saw her name or knew anything about her. And you came in with a respectable 10,000 votes in 2013 as a first-time candidate, just stepping out in a third party in New York.
Yep. No, I was the highest vote getter in New York that year for any Libertarian candidate on the Libertarian line. Mm-hmm. And basically, still a high watermark for the public advocate. I think the only person who's gotten more votes for the Libertarian Party for public advocate in New York City. I think it was 17,000 votes sometime in the 90s. So each race I've been in, out of the 3 races I've been in, 2013 public advocate, I hit that high water mark of 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, when I ran for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer, it was 48,000 votes, putting me as the 3rd, I guess now 4th highest statewide vote total. Now with Larry Sharpe, making me the 4th highest statewide total in the history of New York. I think number 2 for U.S. Senate races. And then my 3rd race was 2017 against Scott Stringer for U.S. New York City Comptroller, and there I did like a 20% increase over the previous candidate's vote total.
Really, I didn't know about the 2017 race. I missed that somehow. I apologize. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of. I spent basically, I think, 4 out of the last 5 years campaigning, because then last year I was traveling the country campaigning across within the Libertarian Party for all the delegates nationally to win the national vice chair spot. So basically, I've been on the campaign trail either in the state, in the city, or nationally over the last 5 years.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. But I'm glad that we've been able to talk with you and spread the word a little bit about the Libertarian. By the way, for people who don't know, and I want to be very clear, I am a conservative Republican. I'm a member of the Republican Party. I do, obviously, this is a partisan leaning show. In other words, I believe in right-leaning values, not left. But at the same time, I like to take the time to speak to every party and everybody out there to let the public know what's going on. I think that's a fair assessment, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. We do need more conversations, because the problem is the polarization we have today basically makes us unable to move forward. Because the problem is when everything is, I have my team, and the only thing we're trying to do is beat the other team, then what happens is that when teams switch, when one team becomes dominant and the other one falls behind, then they just undo everything the other team has done, because it basically becomes a us or them kind of thing. And that makes us unable to move forward. For us to make changes that stick around, everyone has to kind of buy into it. So we do need more discussion between people of different perspectives, whether it's conservative, progressive, libertarian, etc. So I have definitely made it a mission to try to be a more sort of civil figure in politics, a more positive figure, more inclusive figure in politics, because I want any changes, positive changes, to be changes that stick around.
No, absolutely. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. We can't have anything without, I'm sure you saw the 2019 State of the State by Governor Andrew Cuomo. And the thing that has stuck with me every time is that one line he makes when he says, "The time for talking is done." I'm sorry. That's not how government is supposed to work. I don't care if it's for whether you believe in Democrats or it doesn't matter. That's not my concern about that. It's the moment that government, or more importantly, elected officials, decide that they unilaterally have all the right ideas and that no other input is worthwhile, we have a problem. That's what I've always felt.
100% agreed. Basically, once it's like you can think of government and government progress much like a relationship. Basically, if the lines of communication shut down, the relationship deteriorates, and that's the same thing with a country. Being part of a country is a relationship. Even if you're not talking to everybody on the basis, there are things that we all kind of have to have some level of consensus over. And if the lines of communication shut down, that relationship begins to deteriorate, and that's why you see the polarization you see today.
Yeah, and that never works out well for anyone. We always see some of the greatest bills and legislation and ideas in our nation have always come from the combination of ideas and compromise within those ideals of the nation. I mean, that's our Constitution in particular is a great example of it. But it's always that mix. And when we take that away, I always see that when only one side is being emphasized or listened to, we always have a failure. And those laws, that legislation always fails its goals and usually is detrimental.
100% agreed.
Now, let me also ask you, so we're talking a little bit about, let me slip a little bit into, what did you think of the State of the State?
I actually have not been able to had a chance to see it in full detail yet.
Lucky.
But basically, as usual, a lot of the major points that Cuomo put forward, as he put forward when he ran for governor and whatnot, it's just a lot of it sort of one pushing a very a contrast with the president, which oftentimes always rubs me the wrong way when a governor focuses or tries to put themselves in the national spotlight when they were entrusted to kind of focus on what's going on in the state. And also just a lot of the things that have gone on with the state far as like over the years under Cuomo, whether it's the changes in a lot of the healthcare, education, they seem more like political platitudes to set himself up for something else when versus really make transformative changes in New York. If anything, New York has just become a much more bureaucratic, harder place to live. And I see, and then in the New York City with de Blasio, we're just even doubling down on that even further. So it's just compounding for the reasons why New York's becoming a harder and harder place to survive.
Oh, I think it's becoming horrendous. And that's why we've seen 1.3 million people leave over the last 8 years, a trend that's looking to hit roughly 1.5, 1.7 million people who will leave by 2020 when the census starts. Every economic policy we've heard about has failed. The drone testing center, the nano center, the Hollywood studio. We're listening to a one-sided government, now a single-party government that has failed in every economic and social experiment it has done. And this is a template on which the 2020 presidential election is going to be based.
Yep.
And as part of that, we're seeing, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand lie to the public, and now she's running in a race that she said she wouldn't run in as she runs to the left. We're seeing Governor Cuomo come out with a state that's running to the left. We're looking at the Democratic Party and the 2020 presidential election shifting towards socialist Democrats and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which terrifies me. What do you think?
Agreed. And I mean, especially for figures like de Blasio, like Cuomo, like Gillibrand, who all likely have presidential aspirations, they're all pivoting left because of the upcoming presidential primary. And the problem is, if you have every large political figure in New York running for president, then who's running the state? And when you sit there and focus so much on appealing to a base, because at the end of the day, any political primary, you're appealing to a very small plurality of the voting public, then what happens is that basically the primary of the Democratic primary is basically putting New York's policy under sort of a very progressive hostage situation. Because basically the only policy, since all the major politicians in New York are going to be sort of very far left platitudes in order for them to be able to be better off in the primary, but that doesn't necessarily make New York better off. And the problem with a lot of those typical policies of basically kind of universalizing a lot of aid programs, the really malicious effects or the real, like, the things that sort of are the worst about them don't appear right away. Sometimes happen 5-10 years later. But at that point, these people will have already gone to higher office or moved on in their careers. But the damage will have already been done because everybody in New York wants to run for president.
Yeah. And the results of all of this can always reverberate for a long time. Kind of like, as you know, Alex, I've had a big passion for the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. I'm a major advocate of both. And I see the new legislation that's been coming out, especially by Senator Kevin Parker. I don't know if you've been following his state senator, Kevin Parker, where he wants to basically, he's trying to find ways to kill people exercising their Second Amendment rights by giving away their passwords to the government so they can intrude and invade people's privacy, in trying to pass the red flag legislation that's out there, by trying to put a financial burden on people, by having these outrageous insurance policies included so that no normal person could possibly meet the standard that New York State is imposing, and therefore either turning them into criminals for having a legally obtained firearm or by preventing from even considering that. What do you think about it?
Oh, 100% agreed. I mean, this is basically the effects of prohibition. Essentially, prohibition doesn't just happen because you make something illegal. Prohibition occurs when you make something just hard to attain, and that's what they're trying to do with the Second Amendment. They're actually, in some parts, violating your Fourth Amendment so that way they can get around to violating your Second Amendment by basically sacrificing your privacy. And the thing is that once you've given up your privacy and you give up that information, not only does it create a barrier to you exercising your Second Amendment, but it also just gives more information for when the wrong people are in power to misuse against you. This is why, a lot of people always talk about Facebook, Google collecting information, to sell me things that I want, but I'm always much more concerned about government collecting information because there everyone has political ambitions. The wrong person with the wrong access to the wrong information can exercise a lot of power over people and can do a lot of damage. And basically, when you sit there and you use people's desire to consume or provide themselves with safety or any good or service as an excuse to extort information out of them, you put them at danger. And those who choose not to give that information, you're basically telling them that, hey, if you want something, you're going to have to go to a black market where you're going to have to deal with basically criminals and violence in order to get the goods and services that you want, which also then hurts law enforcement because basically law enforcement can go ask a legal gun dealer, for records on maybe, where was this gun purchased or whatnot. So that way they can actually solve a crime. But if all gun purchases are moved to the black market, then that creates a lack of transparency. That actually is going to make it hard to prevent and solve crimes and make there be more injustice when violent crimes do happen. So you want an open market in arms, like you want an open market in anything, because that transparency has a lot of benefits when you're participating in a legal market for something. So I'm generally always against anything that kind of pushes any good or service into a black market because of the negative effects of black market.
No, I can understand that. And I agree. The less transparent, the harder we make it for people, the less transparent it becomes for people, the more dangerous it becomes for people. It's just the way the process has always occurred. So I agree with you intensely there. Let me ask you a question, because I mentioned her before. Have you had a chance? I know you're in Manhattan. Have you had the chance to meet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
No, not yet. No, I have not met her yet. I have occasionally tweeted at her on Twitter, just among different points. Like I think this is one day where she basically called Congress hypocrites for taking their paycheck while the government shut down, which was actually one of the few times I ever actually agreed with her on something. And then at the same time, Trump was making some comment about war, which I agreed with. So I was like, wow, what an interesting day where I'm agreeing with Donald Trump and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a libertarian. So I found that to be an amusing moment. But I mean, they're both kind of, I do draw a lot of parallels between the two because they're both sort of like outside of sort of the typical political mold. And they're both kind of doing something about shifting the Overton window. So when Trump talks about like immigration and the wall, he talks in very stark terms and shifts that Overton window to shift the conversation and open it up in places where it hadn't been before. In the same way that Ocasio-Cortez is when she's coming out basically flat out like really bad ideas like 70 and 90% tax rates, without full context of the history of it. She is trying to shift the Overton window on the conversation about taxes. And both of them are kind of just basically using their ability to not have to stick to, your more traditional left and right of center talking points to really shift what the conversation is on certain issues, oftentimes in directions that I'm not necessarily in agreement with. But it is interesting to show that, like, not only is there a role for people being sort of more thoughtful figures who stay within sort of what is possible in policy, but the role of talking in sort of radical terms to shift what is possible in the discussion. And that's, to me, like, what figures like those two are doing on the left and the right.
Well, I have problems with Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Mm-hmm. I have big problems with her because I don't say this very often about anyone in elected office. I don't have to like people. That's fine. That's one of our rights. I particularly think she's, how should I say? I'll be kind, mindless. She does not understand the consequences of whatever she has said, it appears. So she's either very deceptive and brilliant in making people assume and believe that she has no understanding of her consequences, or she truly believes her statement that her subjective moral beliefs are more important than any facts or consequences of what she says. And that terrifies me.
Oh, agreed. I mean, I feel very similar, and I do think it probably falls into that latter category, where she probably probably doesn't fully appreciate sort of the consequences of what she's saying yet. That does make it interesting because you have more figures like that in the political conversation than you used to have in the past, which has interesting consequences because it's right now causing sort of on a national level. Like, again, I have huge disagreements with the policies in particular that Ocasio-Cortez is promoting, but still, it's interesting to kind of see how this kind of volatility right now in the discussion is affecting the discussion. So, I mean, I've been actively trying to go out there and create videos to kind of help people understand the history of taxation in the United States. So that way they understand that, yes, once upon a time we did have 70, 90% tax rates, but we also had more deductions, more credits. And no one ever paid 70 or 90% tax rates as an effective tax rate. And if we did, we would be a much worse off country because taxes permeate everything in your existence. They take away part of your paycheck. They increase the cost of your goods and services that you go out and purchase. So if your costs are growing and your paycheck is shrinking, you are not better off. So more taxes do not make anyone better off, and no one should understand it better than New Yorkers, but we keep seeing exactly that function. Because every time we pass another bill that says, hey, your employer has to provide you with something, it's not free. Like the whole maternity leave thing, that came out of our paychecks. We got a smaller paycheck, and then other businesses who are paying those taxes, they're increasing the cost of their goods. So we're keeping less and paying more, and we are worse and squeezed out more and more in New York. So it does bother me when New Yorkers are the ones who are advocating for exactly that.
Well, it seems we've become the testing ground, especially under Governor Andrew Cuomo and his comments that he wants to make New York the progressive capital of either the nation or the world. And so we're the testing ground. And we've seen that over the last 60, just about 70 years now, New York has lost population, business, and political influence. I mean, we used to have 47 members of Congress for this state. We now have 27, and in 2020, we are expected, after this next census, we will be down to 25 or 24. It tells you something is going wrong when you lose political power, you lose population, you lose business, debt increases exponentially as you follow this pattern of progressivism in the economics and the social environment. That's what we keep seeing. But that's why we look out for alternatives. And let me ask you this. One of the alternatives, obviously, is the Libertarian Party. As I said, as we both mentioned earlier, you guys are now officially recognized by New York State. And I've talked a little bit with Larry Sharp about this in my interview with him about what does that mean for the Libertarian Party? What does that mean for the public as options? But as the vice chairman of the National Party, how does that affect not only just New Yorkers, but the nation as well?
Well, New York finally given the Libertarian Party, officially New York.
Oh, one moment, you're coming off a little muffled.
What makes things very different now that the Libertarian Party is an official party in New York is that the things that were holding the party back in the past are no longer a problem, which means this creates a very new and very useful tool for change in New York. So basically what's changed is that back before 2018, now that we have party status, before we would have to spend a large portion of our funds in order to just get on the ballot. And we would only be able to get a few candidates on the ballot. So the Libertarian Party had a very limited influence and ability to campaign in New York. Now that we'll have full party status, getting our candidates on the ballot will cost a lot less and will be much more certain, which means we can run more candidates in more places, which means we'll have much more reach. And the thing is, in a left-leaning state that's as left as New York, I'm taking a look at, when I ran in 2016 and Larry last year, you take a look at the portion of the votes that went to Schumer in 2016, the portion of the votes that went to Cuomo in last 2018, you could have taken every non-vote for them, added it all up together, and you still wouldn't have even come close to defeating them. So you do need to have another path because basically A right-leaning message appeals in some parts of the state, but we need to get away from large taxes and large regulation. And a message like Larry's can be that message that can pull from the left, pull from the right to get New York back on track. And the thing is that, as Larry always said, if you can do it in New York, that sets a huge message to the rest of the country. So us having now crossed that threshold, where we're going to be able to run more candidates with down ballot, is going to make top of the ballot candidates like Larry Sharp much more effective. Because I remember when I ran in 2016, the places where I did better vote total wise were places where we had a local candidate. Because that local candidate can be around and be present among those voters all the time. And having those candidates all across the state helps where you have a local party. So when you only have one statewide candidate, it can only be everywhere so often. So it makes it much harder to build up those vote totals. So this really gives us room to do better in New York. And nationally, we've been growing our ballot access, which means we're going to be more effective in 2020. And on top of that, we're getting more press. So like recently with the government shut down and basically everyone feeling really disenfranchised with the battle between Democrats and Republicans, us libertarians, we've been making an effort to actually show our ideas in practice, to show that, you know what, you don't need the government to do everything. We can do things. And we've been going up and cleaning national parks across the country, getting press for cleaning those parks for free out of the goodness of our hearts because we care. And we want to encourage people to care because we want to turn around the trends that we see in this country of people giving up their rights, of people getting their paychecks ransacked, of government feeling they have to be the answer to everything. We have to learn to be more often the answer for ourselves and go into our communities and help out what we can. And that's been a big push for the Libertarian Party. Instead of just engaging in partisan bickering, we're actually going out into communities and trying to show that, you know what, you need to start with your community, make your community the answer for your community so that we can get government out of the way.
Okay. And I can understand and I can see that. Makes a lot of sense. And so I take it that in 2019, as well as 2020, obviously 2020, you'll have more infrastructure built up by then. And I know I asked this of Larry Sharp in our interview, but I'll ask you as well. So are you looking to have candidates in the 2019 races here in New York State? Are you looking at 2020 to have congressional races like the New York 22nd? Are there other areas that you think you may have candidates in?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we're definitely going to have a presence in the public advocate election in New York City. So I know that's going to probably be a fairly contested primary because that'll probably be like our first primary if most of the candidates want to run for that nomination. Mm-hmm. But we would love to have candidates in as many places as possible. Because one, when you run a candidate, you can't win every race, but when you can't win, you can build name ID, you can spread the message, so that way you're much more likely to win a future race.
Kind of like Larry did.
Kind of like Larry did. Like if Larry runs again, he's going to be in a much better position to win, to execute, because his name recognition is so much better now, and his message is starting to become part of the conversation. And the thing is that one, we need to build our bench. So we need candidates all across the state. We can win city council races. We come close. And now with that access, we can come closer because we can dedicate more time to the actual campaigning aspect of it. But, 2019 would be a great year to start building that bench and hopefully, really maybe put a couple wins this year, but really kind of build a bench that can go put some wins in 2020 and really start, getting libertarians in the conversation going forward. We don't want to be like the Reform Party or the Working Families Party or the Green Party, who doesn't take advantage of their ballot access to really make change in the conversation in New York. We want an actively running candidate, building up our local party infrastructure, getting new chapters open so that we are a force within New York. And this is as we're trying to build up all across the country. I mean, this is why the Libertarian Party is the largest of all the emerging parties outside of the Republicans and the Democrats. Because we are looking to be part of the conversation. We are looking to be a force in the conversation. And people always, sit there and say, "Oh, I can't believe you're not as big as the Republicans and the Democrats." But again, in 40 years, the Democrats and Republicans have been around much longer. When they started, a lot of the ballot access rules that hurt third parties' ability to participate didn't exist yet. When they started, there weren't as many states where you had to go build up your organization in. There's all sorts of things, lots of headwinds that we have overcome, and we are continuing to overcome, and we will continue to do so. So, and in New York, we are now in a position where we can really grow at a much more exponential speed and be part of that conversation with figures like Larry, with figures like myself, figures with Tony DeRazio, Kevin, etc. We are really going to have a lot of really good, strong voices in New York to help shape that conversation.
Well, I definitely want to speak with many of them. I know in years past, I've talked to Debbie Carreras. I've talked to, outside of New York State, Lily Tang Williams. I've talked to Kim. Sure.
I think
she was in Virginia. Yes. And many others throughout the states, and especially here in New York, Rich Pertel. I've spoken with him several times. So I look forward, as the party grows, to be able to have more conversations with your candidates throughout. I always think that every qualified candidate should have more access to the public. So that's always important. We open our doors to your party to be able to have those serious questions, just like we've had with you in the past. I do want to ask a question, though, and I didn't get to ask this of Larry when he was in here. The end of our meeting, we had to cut short because we went over on time, as we always do. But we had a great conversation, but I didn't get to ask him this, and I don't know if you can answer this, but you are the national vice chair, so I should be able to at least pose it to you. Is Larry Sharpe going to be running for the presidency in 2020 under the Libertarian title?
As far as I know, there are no plans for a Larry Sharpe 2020 nomination. But you never know. Circumstances change. People change their minds. I mean, if people want to see that, they can always contribute to Larry, encourage Larry. I mean, I would certainly be enthusiastic about such a candidacy because I love Larry. I think his message is strong. I think his charisma is the right charisma. I do think he is a large part of the future of the Libertarian Party and the front lines of the Libertarian Party. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people running for that nomination. It's going to be a very contested nomination. So if there's people who people want to see running for that nomination, they can do a couple different things. One, they can encourage those people to run, contribute to anything that they're doing. But also, if they want to actually be part of the decision-making process, they need to get involved with the Libertarian Party. So that way in 2020, when we have our national convention in Austin, Texas, that they can be a delegate to the convention and be one of the people who actually is on the floor voting for who that nominee will be. Because that nomination will be very consequential because like 2016, 2020 is going to be a very consequential race, and that candidate is going to be part of the conversation much larger than emerging party candidates usually are part of the conversation. Yeah. So I do encourage people to get involved in that decision-making process.
Yeah. Much like Gary Johnson was very influential in the 2016 race. Now, I want to mention that I've heard from people who have been asking about that. They've been questioning that. Had a couple of people even tell me that they were upset because I didn't ask that when I had Larry here last week. And that's just because, again, time didn't allow me to. I did want to ask him this. But we did want to cover it, and just because it is something that I know many people have wondered if that's a possibility or an eventuality. But it's very early. But yet, even so, like I said, we have Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who is now running as a direct lie as a consequence of a direct lie to constituents. We have Governor Cuomo, who is all but already running. You just haven't mentioned it to anyone yet. I mean, many names have already come out. Even in the New York 22nd race, there are 4 people who are running in the race that have not come out. Only one has come out very softly, a soft launch of his campaign. But there's 4 people who are running in that race. And as far as I know, when I spoke to Larry, he mentioned that the Libertarians will be part of that process too. So a lot of elections for 2020 are starting already. We haven't even gotten out of the first month of 2019, and there's already many candidates who are in the 2020 races. So I know it's very interesting for a lot of people right now.
Exciting times. Very, very exciting times. If there's a time to be involved with the Libertarian Party, it's right now. Because right now, we're going through some large growth. and how that growth shaped the party, what's the message of the party, who are the faces of the party, are going to be shaped by now, 2019, 2020. So if you want to really be on the ground floor of shaping a political voice, now is the time.
Well, that's always important, and I'm glad. And people who are interested in the Libertarian Party, please do get in touch with. How would they contact you?
They can contact me by emailing me at my Libertarian Party email address, alex.merced@lp.org. They can also just go to the New York Libertarian Party website by going to newyorklp.org. Basically, or you can just go to the Libertarian Party website and find all the states there, lp.org. But basically what you want to do is find out where your local county chapter is. And if there isn't a chapter in your county, look into starting one. Just contact the chair of New York, currently Jim Rosenbach, great guy, and he can get you the information to start a chapter in your county. What's the process? So that way we can run more candidates, have a presence in more places, and keep this ship growing and moving forward in New York. So that way we can lower your taxes. Stop regulating your business. Stop the unfunded mandate that basically squeeze out local budgets that basically turn towns into ghost towns. Because they have no real policy locally because they have to spend every dime to follow mandates from the state and federal government. The Libertarians are here to help with those things.
Right. Now, I want to make sure I heard that correctly. You said New York, L as in Lima, P as in Papa.com. Is that correct?
.org.
.org. I thank you for the correction. See, everyone's so used to .com, didn't get that. So it's NewYorkLP.org. Okay.
Yep.
Now I know we've covered a lot of things, and we can keep going for hours upon hours on not only the things we agree, but also things we disagree, and just the future of what we're going to see happening. So we can have a long conversation, and we've had it in the past, and even personally, privately, we've had that. Let me instead, though, ask, is there anything at the moment that we haven't touched on, that we haven't addressed to some extent, or some new idea or expansion of an idea that you would like to address here at the end? I just want to give you that opportunity as always.
I mean, there's always a robust policy discussions going on, and I think there's a lot of great policy ideas on the table. So there's no particular issue that I think we haven't sort of talked about at the moment when regarding at least New York and the Libertarian Party in New York. But I highly do recommend people going to go check out Larry Sharp's website, LarrySharp.com, and seeing the ideas that he put forward in his campaign, because those ideas are still relevant to New York and can still help New York. I recommend people to go look up the videos I made in 2016 for my U.S. Senate race, because the policy ideas that I made regarding federal policy back in that race still apply as far as being able to, again, lower your taxes, deregulate, create ways that will improve the economy by reforming all sorts of different areas. So those policy ideas are still out there, and we need more candidates at every level running and talking about those ideas, and also just people across different parties to hear those ideas and include it in their policy discussions. So again, go to LarrySharp.com, go on YouTube, look up Alex Merced 2016 to find those videos that I made regarding different policies then, so that way you can expand whoever's listening, expand the policy discussion, the policy ideas you have in your arsenal to help make change in the policy discussion.
All right. Well, I want people to definitely look that up, and they can also look on the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast for my interviews with current and past interviews with Larry Sharp and yourself, for that access as well. And we look forward to it. And obviously, as the National Vice Chairman, I'm going to hold you to the fact that when you get your presidential candidate, I want to speak to them, and I'm going to hold you responsible for that, Alex. So just so you have fair warning, because I want to do that interview. But other than that, I do want to thank you for the time. I know for a lot of people, they don't know we've taped this because there's a snowstorm throughout New York State. Many people got a lot of snow. I should ask, and I didn't ask it at the beginning, but you've been okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm in Connecticut visiting my mother, so yeah, we got a little bit of snow, so I'll have to be doing some shoveling later, but right now everyone's just kind of cozy at home, so, but yeah, no, it'll be fine, and then basically I think tomorrow I ride back into Brooklyn and back to the grind, politically and professionally, in my day-to-day life. And if people want to learn more about sort of what my day-to-day life entails, head over to alexmerced.com, and you can find everything I do politically and otherwise there, where you can hear, again, ideas that help you shape your conversations that you have.
All right. Well, I'm sure people are going to look forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. I always like our conversations and being able to follow up. And obviously, there is an open door here for you. And of course, the entire Libertarian Party, as well as the Democrats and the Republicans, of course, and anyone else that's involved in any level of politics in our nation and in our state, in our local communities. There's always an open door here. But with that said, I want to thank you, Alex Merced, for taking some time to discuss the Libertarian Party, yourself, and what's going on for affecting all of us in this nation and in this state.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.